Thank you so much for coming on my podcast today. How are you?
Hi, Imogen. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invite.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So yeah, sort of like how we structure the podcast. I'm just going to ask you like a few questions about like your background and like how you got to where you are now, and then just sort of go from there. Really, if that sounds good.
Sounds great. Yeah, excited for it. Thanks.
Fantastic. So I was going to say, how can you just sort of tell us about your career today and how you've like got to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So started off in engineering, electromechanical engineer, really for Cummins many years ago now. Quickly got into sort of operations management, which involved a bit of process. That's served me quite well coming into the automation space. Got involved with Six Sigma projects, which obviously is a little bit more detailed than the automation side of things. Did a bit of manufacturing transformation, moving organisations around. We relocated some production facilities from the UK around the world. So that sort of was a bit more of a consulting kind of role. The role I had there, which sort of served me well for them transition into consulting, and then got into sort of digital transformation. Worked with the Islamic Bank last year on their digital transformation and grew the RPA line of business for the consultancy firm that I worked for, which really sort of gave me. Sort of brought together all my operations process skills and sort of brought that into sort of the new technology of business process automation, which is obviously very exciting space. Technology is going very well, and it's going to really fundamentally change the way I think that businesses operate and how we interact with the robots is going to be sort of critical in the coming years. So we started Amplio last year with the sort of intention of bringing this good value and our experience to clients and help them sort of navigate the robotic revolution as it hopefully will be known.
Sure. No, I feel like I've spoken to a lot of people who are now like in the RPA space who've come from like the Lean Six Sigma sort of like process improvement initial background. I feel like a lot of people, seem to sort of take that, start from there and move on.
Natural progression.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and obviously RPA is still, it's still an up and coming thing for most people. And obviously we know that sort of like 70% of RPA programs sort of fail initially. Do you think that this is due to like businesses focusing solely on like the potential end goal and like cost saving instead of focusing like directly on each and every like individual automation, would you say?
I mean, it's obviously important to focus on each individual automation as it comes through the pipeline. That said, assuming there is a pipeline, I think a lot of the reasons people fail is that there's not really the robust governance there. I mean, a proof of concept's fair enough, quite a small undertaking that perhaps doesn't need too much focus on the governance. Generally it's just sort of to prove the concept within the organisation. Obviously, the technology we know is proven itself time and again in recent years. So. I think for me, the reason potentially that people may fail is sort of the governance around it. It's not just about the technology being pushed into the organisation. There's a whole sort of suite of things that need to be considered in and around that. There's plenty of technical opportunities. It's really how do we ensure that we're targeting the right opportunities from a commercial perspective that give good value to the organisation. We generally use sort of what we call our could you, should you analysis. It's basically a simple 2x2 matrix that just helps clients appraise their pipeline and understand exactly where each automation fits on that pipeline to make sure that actually, technically speaking, okay, the process is there, but actually from a commercial perspective, is it viable within the organisation? Is it going to bring good value? The overall strategy.
No, perfect. I suppose that's the most important thing, isn't it? If it's not commercially viable, then it's going to lose, obviously, like momentum and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and I think one of the new things, obviously, the main vendors out there, they're starting to like offer like a variety of online accreditations, to become a developer. Would you say that the accessibility of these qualifications make it, more difficult for companies, consultancies to find strong devs that have that amount of like commercial experience? Would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question, Imogen. I think there are lots of software vendors out there, and they all provide their own sort of university, as it were, with their qualifications. if an organisation is focused on a particular vendor, then obviously these courses are great for exposing people to the technology, sort of that training regime and that pipeline approach to developing their staff. And we sort of took a similar approach in our previous organisation, having the junior developers. We were using UiPath predominantly, and we had those work through those, depending on whether they were business analysts or developers. We worked through the UiPath University, and that proved to be very useful. However, the problem came when we're sort of talking about larger, more complex automations, or those that actually were developed by somebody else. So it becomes a little bit more difficult when the programming, the fundamental programming skills aren't there. It does become difficult for people to sort of really build robust automations over and above the very simple ones that are sort of trained on those courses. And obviously every coder has their own sort of handwriting, if you like, their own style, which then if the person maintaining the solution isn't the person that wrote the solution, again we can have sort of trouble there. And there are many different vendors, and each with their slightly different interface. Although the fundamentals of programming are very similar, I think it can be difficult to find, if people don't have that fundamental background in programming, it can be difficult for someone who's just learned to use the software to then turn their hand at different software or more complex automation. So I think really what's more important than the software, particular software vendors' university training courses, I think, is the robust and general programming skills there. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It can be difficult to find a competent developer who potentially has only just used one of the free courses and learn the interface of the software vendor. So yeah, absolutely, great question.
Thank you. No, I think it's something that a lot of what I find a lot when talking to clients is, there's some people who've done sort of like a few accreditations, but when they actually get in front of, like you said, a more difficult and like ambiguous automation, sometimes there's difficulties, there from someone who's only just done a few accreditations instead of getting that commercial experience. So, and I mean, my final question, Stuart, would be, what would be like your one tip for anyone who has just started their RPA journey from yourself, from your experience?
One tip, well, I think from a business perspective, business analysts, project managers, things like that, just quite simply do not neglect the commercials. This technology is going to apply to every industry, really, we think, and there's a lot of technical opportunities there, but really what we need to understand is the commercial viability there. That's what's going to get the buy-in from the leadership in the business. It's not a case of just using a technology for the sake of using a technology. There obviously has to be a very solid business case there. And then from a technical perspective, as sort of mentioned in the previous question, I'd caution any sort of junior developers from marrying a particular software vendor and relying too much on their particular interfaces. These things may change. I would recommend to them to develop more general programming skills so that they can, and then it would make them sort of a better generalist in terms of programming anyway, and then they could potentially navigate any consolidation that may happen in that space, which I think could be quite significant in the coming years.
For sure, definitely. Just making yourself as accessible and I guess as employable, I suppose, as possible is always going to work out for the best.
I mean, that's true regardless of the industry, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Stuart, for coming on today and speaking to me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and speak to you very soon.
Thank you very much, Imogen. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.